Sorry, who would you like to see on the Iron Throne?
I know who's going to be on the throne at the end, so I better not say. But there'll be a few people sitting on it before the end, so.
You just gave me the look of death, George. A little scared. I put Tyrion on it because I think Westeros would be wicked.
Yeah.
I think Tyrion would be okay with it.
George has told us the answer.
All right.
I'll go with Tyrion.
Why?
Season 8 of the greatest show on Earth and in TV history is likely going to end with the Iron Throne being meaningless, being destroyed, being an utter pile of ashes and shit that no one really wants to rule from. Or at least, that's what we've all been told. In this video, I'm going to go over an in-game leak and several details that I think allude to the fact that the Iron Throne will mean something in the end and who sits it. This video will contain spoilers, so here's your sign. You're spoiling it! You're spoiling everything! Oh yeah? Before we get started, please slap a like on this video, as the like goal is going to be continuing on with the theme of the last video, 4,420. Also, make sure you're subscribed. Game of Thrones Season 8 will be here in less than 100 days, and it's my job to keep you entertained throughout this long night. Also, make sure you have your notifications turned on so that way you get alerted every single time I drop a video. Now, as you saw from the clip at the beginning of this video, there will be someone who sits the throne in the end. Now, George R. R. Martin has told Dan and Dave who sits the throne. The fact that we all think that it's going to be meaningless and sort of just like non-relevant, and that there may be some sort of governing body over Westeros, or just someone who will sit the Iron Throne that we're not really expecting, that's all because of the fandom. Anyone watching this video right now, you're partially to blame for certain theories being accepted. I feel like from what I've experienced, if a theory or an idea, really just speculation, if good speculation is mentioned and enough people can get behind that, and if you provide one or two good sources of as you know, evidence, then the majority of people are going to believe that, and the more people believe it, the more that it becomes an accepted fact. And once something becomes an accepted fact, that's it. It's going to spread like wildfire. And then it becomes increasingly impossible to try to convince people otherwise. And that's that. That's what's happened with this Tyrion will betray Daenerys theory. I remember back in January of 2018, which is fucking crazy to even say last year, but back in January of last year, I proposed the idea that maybe, just maybe, there were certain context clues that would lead to Tyrion betraying Daenerys. The main thing at that time that I was basing my speculation off of is the very last scene that we see Tyrion in Game of Thrones Season 7. Now, to me, it has not been a question of how does Tyrion love Daenerys. Does he love her as a friend, as an associate, or just as someone that he looks up to as sort of like a boss? Or does he love her as a future wife? Is he in love with her? To me, that's never been a question. I know from the fact of him first meeting her, like many of the men that Daenerys happens upon, they fall in love with her at first sight. I remember saying all the way back in Season 6, the moment when Tyrion was pinned as Hand of the Queen to Daenerys, this is when the camera and the writers and every person involved with this scene made it very clear, blatantly obvious to us. If you've been paying attention to Tyrion, you know that in these moments, he realizes that he loves Daenerys. And what's funny to me is that people in that video that I made way back in Season 6 were talking shit to me in the comment section. They kept telling me, no way, dude, you're making up stuff. You're seeing what you want to. That brings this all back around full circle. A few months ago, another fellow Game of Thrones YouTuber brought up some inside information that he has regarding a betrayal from Tyrion in Game of Thrones Season 8. Ever since then, the internet's somewhat been lit afire, and you cannot convince people otherwise that Tyrion will betray Daenerys in Game of Thrones Season 8. Now, I can't say that I haven't been, one of the people who's added onto that theory. I myself did some research and found out that several scenes in Season 7 foreshadow a Tyrion betrayal, or just some sort of betrayal from Tyrion in regards to Daenerys and Jon Snow. We have the scene with Olenna warning Daenerys, telling her to be done with these clever men and you're a dragon, act like a dragon. Then you have in the very last episode when Daenerys and Jon are planning their journey north, you have Jorah mentioning that one lucky man with a bolt could take you out if you ride on horseback as opposed to your dragon. Then we have the scene with Tyrion that was somewhat cut short at the dragon pit. He has some sort of exchange with Cersei that we do not see, and it's off camera. But just before that, he mentions to Jon and Daenerys that sometimes a lie is the best way to go about things. It was the re-examination of that scene that made me think maybe he doesn't betray Daenerys. Maybe all of season 7 they tried to lead us up into thinking that Tyrion will betray Daenerys, just like they did with Arya and Sansa. Pretty much all of season 7, I was like, okay, I don't know which episode is going to happen, but post episode 5, one of these Stark sisters is going to die. Arya's likely going to kill Sansa and maybe take her face and become the Lady of Winterfell. That's the way it was written, at least. So when you take into consideration all the foreshadowing and clues that's laid groundwork for in season 7, it's not completely out of question as to why everyone thinks that there's going to be, and we're guaranteed, a betrayal from Tyrion next season. But let's rewind everything all the way back to the beginning of this video. Remember, I showed you a clip where George R. R. Martin has confirmed that he's already told Dan and Dave who sits the Iron Throne in the end. He actually mentions that it will be seated by multiple people, and then he looks over to Cersei and to Tyrion. But also, let's not forget the fact that nearly every single person who took part in this interview said that they would like to see Tyrion Lannister on the Iron Throne. Even Kit Harington says he would like to see Tyrion, a Lannister, sit the Iron Throne. Now, this was way back in 2013, and if I'm correct, season 3 hadn't even aired yet. So the main reason why these actors may be saying they see Tyrion as the most likely candidate to sit the Iron Throne was, if you judge from episodes 1 through 20, the first 2 seasons of Game of Thrones, Tyrion is the most likely choice. As of right now, the Lannisters control the Iron Throne, and Ned Stark would have been the next best candidate, but he lost his head in episode 9 of season 1. So Tyrion sort of gets a head start. Get it? But we see that Tyrion has the most potential with him traveling to the Wall, spending a lot of time with the Starks, trying to correct his brother's mistakes. All of that sort of adds on to it as to why we, as the viewers and the actors, sort of want to see Tyrion on the Iron Throne. Another big thing too is at that time in season 2, we obviously hated Cersei, but we also sort of felt bad for her with Stannis invading King's Landing. We weren't really sure what was going to happen. And remember, that was when she was still being somewhat nice to Sansa. So every single character, just like every person in real life, has shades of gray, and no one is purely evil or purely good. It all depends on your point of view and where you stand on which side of the argument. But at that time, all we really knew about Stannis is that he's this crazy dude who's allowing this red woman to burn people in order to sacrifice them so that he can be successful in his wars. So if you are a show-only watcher, in your mind, Stannis is some sort of religious zealot, and we honestly think him to maybe a little bit worse than Cersei. We quickly find out otherwise, but the way that Tyrion handles himself at the Battle of the Blackwater and slaps Joffrey around, that gives the average show watcher, or the AVS rather, gets a seed planted in their head that Tyrion is a major candidate for the Iron Throne. We see him and all the other characters, and Tyrion is meant to stand out. Now, before we get on to that leak, I just want to take a second to go on a little side rant, and you can skip past this for about a minute if you want to get straight into the leak. Okay, so like I just mentioned, a lot of people who watch the show and have never read the books interpreted Stannis as a religious zealot. This was obviously due to the fact the way that Dan and Dave interpreted Stannis in the books, but also, and more importantly, this is the way they wanted to adapt the novels for television. Their goal is to make the show as popular as possible, and one of the things you have to do is cut storylines from the books that are intriguing, fucking amazing, involve some of the most amazing characters, but they have to be cut because this is being streamlined for television. If they were to include every single character in George R. R. Martin's novels, then let's be honest, we'd be on season 2 and the show would have like 300 plus fucking episodes. Now that would be awesome, but that's not practical. There's no way that you can keep up a show that has a $10 to $20 million budget, not per season, but per fucking episode. There's no way that you could keep that going without appealing to the mass audience. And I'm sorry for this right here, but it annoys the ever-loving piss out of me when I see someone comment on a video saying, well, that's not how it went down in the books. In the books, that actually goes, no shit, the books are better. The book can literally spend 4,000 pages describing one scene, so that when you put down that book and you realize that you're stuck in shitty real life world, you become depressed and want to pick it up and keep reading more and more. But bringing this whole thing back around, we all have to remember that the books in the show are similar, but they are ultimately separate. The show is an adaptation of a novel, of several novels written by an author who intentionally wrote them away so that they couldn't be adapted for movies or television. David Benioff is a writer himself, and he's actually mentioned in an interview that he hates adapting movies or television series from books because you have to cut plot points and characters, and in a way that's butchering the artist's work. I guess the whole point that I'm trying to make in this little rant is the fact that we may not agree with certain choices Dan and Dave take, but here's the thing. We didn't spend hours talking to George trying to convince us to let us adapt his work into television over a nice big fat butter steak, and also, we do not have any sort of film experience whatsoever. It drives me nuts to hear people commenting on shit that they aren't qualified to really say anything on. I really do apologize for that rant, but I felt those things needed to be said, and my opinion needed to be shared. Are these all after all my videos? So what we've been led to lead so far about Game of Thrones Season 7, the biggest foreshadowing clues that we take away from leading into next season is that Tyrion will in fact betray Daenerys or Jon Snow at some point next season. And according to the leaks, Tyrion is set to be executed in the Dragon Pit, in which a large amount of the cast is said to be present, presiding over his trial. Here's the thing, there are no actual pictures of this trial, and it's more so just speculation judging on where the actors were present at certain times of filming locations. Now, a few things that we do have confirmations of next season are Jon and Cersei do meet at some point. Now, I've sort of wavered back and forth on the fact of whether I think this was filmed intentionally just to throw us off, or if this actually did happen, and I pretty much land on the fact that it actually did happen, and it will be a scene that we see in Season 8, just for the simple fact that they would not have logged all of these staff and crew members, including the equipment, up there just to take a few pictures that they know would inevitably be leaked online. That wouldn't really make much sense, and the rumor is that they spent several hours, even a few days, filming at this location. And the other few things are Winterfell being destroyed or burning. We actually have video of Winterfell being burned, and then also these massive body piles that will take place. So we know there's going to be a major battle that will involve all of the armies that are present in Westeros next season versus the Army of the Dead. Now, the details on which sides the armies are going to be fighting for and who they're going to be fighting for aren't really clear, but we have it confirmed from the Night King, Vladimir Furtick, that this episode will happen in the third part of the season, and it's going to take the majority of an episode. Now, those few things, in my opinion, are some of the only things that we have confirmed for Game of Thrones Season 8, and everything else is sort of just hearsay. Now, like I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, Tyrion has been somewhat led up to be the most likely candidate to sit the Iron Throne. He's the only one out of him, Jon and Daenerys, that actually wants to sit the Iron Throne and has, for the most part, made that very apparent throughout the series. Remember, in Season 7, he kept instilling in Daenerys that she must have an heir. If she dies, then her entire quest and everyone that came along with her is pretty much dead in the water. All of those people who she united and brought together would have no reason to stay together. It wasn't until Season 5 when people really started not seeing as Tyrion as a likely candidate. He drank his way across the entire narrow sea and made a few questionable choices. This, in my opinion, was sort of justified because he had just lost everything. He had to kill the one woman he thought he loved, and then also he had to kill his father. And no matter how shitty your parents are, they still brought you into this world. So he still lost two greatest loves of his life that day. Another reason why he sort of got knocked off the radar as the leading likely candidates for the Iron Throne for the most part is probably because the time that he spent in Season 6 was with characters that were on the minor scale. Cersei, Jaime, and all the Starks had well-developed stories, so when Tyrion was with them in those scenes, he did nothing but enhance it, so he loved it even more. So then when he gets shoved over in Essos, and he's with minor second-tier characters like Missandei and Grey Worm, his scenes aren't as likable, and we honestly can't wait to get back into Westeros to where, in our minds, the real story is happening. Not to say that Daenerys isn't part of the real story, but let's be honest, we all wanted her to hurry up and get her ass over to Westeros so she can start burning stuff. And now, let's jump into the leak. In the end, Jon nearly loses Daenerys, and this is what causes them to abandon the Iron Throne. After they defeat the Night King, the battle for King's Landing and the Iron Throne begins. This is episode 5, and at the start of the episode, Jon begs Daenerys to leave with him after they secure King's Landing. She mentions how it's their birthright. If they do not take the Iron Throne, then who will? Jon replies that to sit the Iron Throne means to give up any semblance of happiness they may have had. With great power comes great sacrifice. The scene ends with the two of them making a promise to each other. The siege of King's Landing takes the majority of the episode. By this point in the season, Daenerys has lost both dragons. It gets to a stalemate. Cersei is trapped in the Red Keep and threatens to blow everything up if Jon and Daenerys do not pack up and leave. She meets with Jon and tells him that they can be rulers of smoke and ash and that they will go down in history as the foreign invaders who brought down the crown. Tyrion attempts to convince Cersei to leave with her child and head for Essos. He guarantees her a safe voyage if she lays down her arms. She refuses. After this meeting, it's revealed that Cersei hired a faceless man to attempt to kill Daenerys. The assassin's attempt is thwarted, but Dany is nearly killed. Jon then leads a group of men to take Cersei hostage. She has a trial in the streets of King's Landing, and her punishment is carried out at the Dragon Pit. She gets beheaded by Jon Snow. The scene is very similar to Ned's death, except replace Sansa and Arya with Tyrion and Jaime. In the end, after Dany has healed, Jon convinces her to stay up north and rebuild Winterfell. Jon tells Tyrion he does not want the throne and that all he's ever wanted was his family and to be loved. Tyrion accepts Jon's offer and tells him that he will rule as their hand from King's Landing. Now that was sent to me through the DMs over on Twitter at Sir_Hunt, speaking of which, make sure you go follow me. But that, along with the many other leaks on this channel that I cover, has its flaws, and I'm going to leave the flaws for you guys to pick through. The main point of this video was to sort of inject the idea that maybe Tyrion isn't going to betray Daenerys, maybe he's going to sit the Iron Throne in the end. Jon and Dany would have lost so much, and there's no way that either one of them would want to rule. To be honest, for the entire 7 kingdoms, they've already been ruling. Jon's been Lord Commander in the North for a good while now, and he was officially named King in the North back in Game of Thrones Season 7. And then you have Daenerys, who brought herself up and has been ruling over the Dothraki and uniting every single person she comes across, regardless of their differences. This whole story has been telling the journey of Jon and Daenerys being rulers. So why would they want to be rulers in the end? Tyrion, on the other hand, is the greatest candidate, wants the job, and arguably will do whatever's best for the 7 kingdoms. Well, alright, with that being said, I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you could please slap a like on this video, as the like goal is going to be 4,420. Also, make sure you're subscribed, and then make sure every notification's turned on, so that way you get alerted every single time I drop a Game of Thrones video throughout this long night. Super special shout out to every single member of my Patreon family over on patreon.com/SirHuntsReviews. Also, I want to thank and give a shout out to every single person watching this video right now. My name's Mark, and this has been Sir Hunts, keeping you entertained throughout this long night. Reviews.